So welcome to Madlik, the podcast. This is Jeffrey Stern, and as you know, at Madlik, we like to shed a little light on a Jewish tradition or a Jewish text. This week, we begin reading the Torah afresh, anew, for the first time, all over again. And I'm down in Florida visiting my dad, who unfortunately checked into the hospital today. He's 93 years young. And sometimes the candles of Madlik flicker brighter, and sometimes they flicker. And my dad's a fighter, and his candle is flickering strong. So here I am down in Florida doing what many Jewish children have done in the past, visiting my parent and trying to gain a little wisdom and provide a little joy, nachas, and strength. So sit back, buckle up, and let's start reading the Torah all over again. So Genesis, more than any other book of the Torah, is simple narrative. It's the narrative of the creation of the world, and much more importantly, the creation of the people and ideology and faith of Israel. So it goes through Cain and Abel and Noah and the patriarchs, and it ends just before this group of ancestors, tribal leaders, became a nation in Egypt, and we begin the story of the Exodus. So how are we supposed to take these stories? Are they simply stories? Are they supposed to be believed as history, moral tales? So I'd like to start with a story. There was once this great rabbi, leader of a community, who had to supplicate the king on behalf of his community. And so he was introduced to the king, and the king wanted to know what his credentials were. Who is this guy? So person after person in the community told one amazing story after another about him. All the wonderful good deeds that he had accomplished, the charitable institutions that he had founded, even the miracles that he had worked in order to save a member of his congregation, a member of the community. And the stories went on, and they became more and more unbelievable as they went along. And finally, the monarch had had enough, and he said incredulously to the character witness, "You can't possibly expect me to believe everything you're telling me." And the character witness turned around and said to him, "With all due respect, Your Majesty, you might not believe every story that you've heard about our leader, but let me ask you, do people tell such stories about you?" I think this story goes pretty far in explaining how at least I look at the tales and the narratives of the Bible. It's not so much that they happened, if they happened, how they happened, or even who they happened to. These are the stories that my people has told for many generations. Included in the stories are our aspirations, our foibles, and certainly also our weaknesses and the evolution of our thoughts, our biases, our prejudices, and both good and bad about us. But it's the stories that we tell about ourselves that are important to me as much as anything else. And so the stories are as much an insight into our own minds as they are as an insight into the minds of the protagonists themselves. There's another Hasidic story where a Rebbe is questioned about a miracle story that was told. And he said to his student, "If you believe every Hasidic miracle story that you hear, you're a tippish, you're a fool. But if you don't believe every one of these stories could have happened, you're a koifer, you're an apikoros." And while I don't ascribe to miracles myself, there's no question that the other aspect of the stories of a Genesis, of our Genesis, is not only does it give an insight into who we are, it gives an insight into our aspirations, the miracles that we wish for, the hopes that we have against all hope, and provides the optimism and the capacity to dream that we all so desperately need. Ultimately, the phrase from the traditional texts that has always triggered my imagination the most is one that I first found in Nachmanides, in the Ramban. And he brings it up when discussing how the patriarchs, whether it's Abraham or Isaac, went down to Egypt, in a sense foretold the story of their future progeny who went down to Egypt as a multitude. And what Nachmanides says is Maase Avot Siman Lebanim. The stories of the patriarchs were a sign for the children. And although he says that in respect to the Avot, the patriarchs themselves, I take it in a much broader way. Remember, Avot doesn't only have to refer to a father or a patriarch, a male forebear, if you will. Avot can also mean a source. So the Lamed Tet Melachot, the 39 types of work that you can't do on Shabbat, are called Avot Melachot, the primary or the source typos of all types of work. And Pirkei Avot too can be the ethics of the fathers, but it can also be the chapters of our core, our source, our most vital beliefs and guidelines. So Maase Avot to me really refers to the actions, the stories, the narratives of our forebears in general, and of our sources and of our origins. So therefore would include the creation of the world itself. Siman Lebanim are a sign to the children. Siman means symbol. Simli means representative, representational. It can be used also as the opposite of factual. Simli means symbolic. So Maase Avot, Siman Lebanim, can very easily mean the narratives of our origins are symbolic, or should be taken symbolically to their children. It's interesting that while the earliest source for the full phrase Maase Avot Siman Lebanim seems to be in the Ramban, in the Midrash it takes this statement to be not so much descriptive as prescriptive. So for instance, in Bereshit Rabba it says, in reference to Abraham, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shav, Ata Siman Lebanicha. Said the Holy One, blessed be He, to Abraham, come back. You are a siman. You are a sign to your children. So it's as though God was telling Abraham, be very careful what you do and how you do it, because what you are doing is in a sense prototyping and paradigming for your descendants. So from that perspective, if you do take the whole narrative in the Bible, especially Genesis, as something that is simply symbolic, and it's created by us, and you add to that the extra level that not only are the activities of these symbolic individuals to be taken as symbols, but they are to be created prescriptively to create role models for us, then the myth maker has an added responsibility of creating myths that show the way for future generations. We're talking about commentators and future generations up to us, the responsibility to interpret our texts in a way that will be a siman to our children, that will be a symbol and an inspiration to our own children, is heavily felt upon us. Now, if you're a historian, the worst thing that you can be accused of is anachronism. Anachronism, enacting anachronistically and interpreting a text anachronistically, is when a modern projects modern contemporary thoughts back down on a society and on a text that couldn't possibly have thought in those terms. So, for instance, you would be guilty of anachronism if you took a modern concept of monotheism and you project it back down onto Abraham. So while for a historian this would be the worst thing to be accused of, I believe that looking at the Bible the way I'm suggesting, anachronism becomes not something to keep away from. It becomes almost an obligation. The texts take on their life by us, in fact, projecting back down on them our own biases and our own foibles and our own ideals and concepts. And doing it consciously means that it doesn't take away from us the responsibility to enjoy and to explore and to learn about what they might have meant and what their evolution is. The history of ideas is the most fascinating part of history, if you ask me. So this is how I read Genesis. And because I'm recording this podcast in a hospital where my father is, thank God, recuperating very quickly, I can't help but think about Maase, Avot, סימן, לבנים in a very personal sense. Because I was privileged to know my grandmother, who lived to the ripe old age of 102, and visited her in this same hospital. And my father said to me, you know, when I look in the mirror nowadays at 93, sometimes I see my mother, your grandmother. And the truth is that when I look at my dad, and I'm sure all of us, when we look at our parents as they get old, we need to see ourselves. So Maase, Avot, סימן, לבנים can be taken on a very personal level, because our parents are symbols of what we are and what we will become. And we have to learn from them how to deal with length of days and aging and health issues. So with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. So as always, we end today's podcast with a song. And today's song comes from Eicha, Lamentations, chapter 5:21. In English it says, turn us back, O Lord, to you, and we will turn, renew our days as of before. And you would think that the verse that we just quoted refers to teshuvah, or it refers to reclaiming the past. But the truth is that this verse is very known to most of us because we sing it every time we open the Ark of the Torah. And we talk about Chadesh Yemenu Ki Kedem, renew our days as they were in the past. Turn us back, O Lord, to you, and we will turn. So, and it talks about reclaiming the Torah and learning the Torah. Maase, Avot, סימן, לבנים, reclaiming the voices of our forebears, of our parents, and bringing them up to today's contemporary times. But on another very primal level, it talks about Chadesh Yemenu Ki Kedem, renew our days as of old. It's a personal request. Don't make us old. Renew our days as of old. Let us appreciate those who are old, who have an insight into youth that the youth could never have. And so I bring you Shlomo Garbach singing Hashivenu.
la 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 השיבנו השם אליך ונשוב חדש חדש ימינו חדש ימינו כקדם